the acquisition reports is the place to analyze traffic for our marketing campaigns. They might really spend most of their time inside the acquisition reports. So there's 4 sections to the acquisition reports. There's the overview, which will give you overview breakdown, usually through the ABC method of the acquisition traffic coming to your website. And then under that, we have all traffic, and we usually see it broken down into source and medium. And we talked about the source and medium before. The source, where it's coming from, like Facebook, and the medium could be the way it comes to your website. Now, I really take some time into doing that. Now, that source and medium comes through what we call UTM tracking codes. They're really important. I think they're called urchin tracking codes. That's what they used to be before Google acquired them. But they're parameters you put on your URL that tell your Google Analytics where your visitors come from. So at the bare minimum, when you're putting in your tracking, you're doing campaigns and you're putting website links up in Facebook or Google Ads or whatever, and you're generating some links with UTM tracking codes on them, need to make sure you have a source and medium on there and name them consistently. So you can analyze here the data to measure how effective and successful your marketing campaigns are using all the metrics that are available within Google Analytics. So this will best help you understand what advertising channel brings the most engaged users to improve your return on advertising spend or your return on investment. Just a quick note here, I would be definitely looking at measuring the return on advertising spend more than return on investment, as it's a more useful metric in basically understanding how effective your advertising is, because you want to get the best return on advertising spend. Return on investment is good, but it's not as accurate as ROAS. So this is what you see when you go into your acquisition overview. You can see a snapshot, a pie chart showing you where most of your traffic's coming from. The majority of traffic to this website comes from organic search, followed by direct, and then social and all the others that are broken down. This is the other category here. Now, other just really means that it couldn't be defined where it came from. And if you don't use your UTM codes effectively enough, you will see this other increasing up to be a lot. And you can make up your own custom channels to try and help filter that down a bit better as well. But there's a few techniques that you can use to bring down the other, because you really want to see that other at the bottom of your reports. You don't want to see it up there in the top 4 kind of areas, maybe even the top 5. It should be right down the bottom, because it just means that you can't tell where they came from. So you can't even analyze that information to improve it. And so on this page, you'll see also the users coming through over time. That all depends on the time period that you've got set up on the reports. You'll see the overall goal conversion rate. You could have many goals set up on your website, but this just basically aggregates the whole lot of them together and provides you an overall figure. So it's an overall kind of health check on your engagement on goal conversions of your website. Now down below, we see the ABC, or the acquisition behavior and conversions pivot table, and we can see that compared to all the different channels that we have up on here. So we can see the breakdown of metrics in more detail, and you can analyze that kind of data here. And that's what we're going to do. So from here, one thing is very obvious. The number of goal conversions coming from referral channel is high. So you can see on the right here, this is huge, 0.81%, where everything else is really not doing well before. All these other channels are just not performing really much at all. Referral is really strong. So again, I said earlier that referrals tend to have a higher conversion rate than other channels. That is usually evident, and you'll see it in your reports. People trust referrals. That's what it comes down to. The more referrals you have, the likely it will be that you'll get more conversions on your website. So we can break this down into the actual channels report. So under the acquisition, underneath the overview, you have the channels. So you can again see this pivot table, and you can see it coming down to the acquisition behavior and conversions, the ABC, and you can see all your channels listed here, and then you can see the metrics of performance. So by now, there's a common theme in operation here. You'll see these metrics most commonly in all these reports all the time. If you wanted to add a secondary dimension here, say it be the source or the medium or a campaign name, maybe you want to add a campaign name to see how many of a specific campaign was more successful than others from a specific channel. And you can do that. It'll change the data, but you can do that. But all this information about metrics is usually set, except that you can change the actual goal here and target a specific goal. So within this table, we also said before that the referrals was quite high. So if we go on to the next step, we've highlighted that. You can see here, the goal completions on the referrals is almost 5,000, and the goal conversion rate we saw earlier, 0.81%. That's why. We have more goal conversions coming through here and a low amount of, well, not low, but a lower amount of traffic compared to organic search. So people come in through organic, but not many of them make a goal conversion. A lot more come in and do it from a referral. This actually shows the source of your referrals. There is a report under acquisition that has referral URLs coming in, so you can see exactly where these referrals are coming from. We can highlight here that this referral is the strongest one. Now, there's actually a problem here in this report because this referral is actually coming from the payment gateway. Now, the reason it's coming through, I mean, this is really a false positive because this isn't a real referral. What happens is the customer leaves the website, goes to the payment gateway, and then comes back into the website. So what's happening here is that the session is being interrupted, and then it looks like the customer is being referred from the payment gateway URL. That's why it's being counted as a referral, because the Google Analytics is automatically tracking referrals. That's what it does. Whenever you get someone coming from another website, it doesn't have to have the UTM parameters on it. It will detect the website they came from and report it as the referral URL. And so in this case, we know that that's actually the transaction, the payment gateway URL. We need to go and add this as a referral exclusion under the admin area. So you go to Google Analytics admin, you go to your property, you go to referral exclusions, and you put this in. So what this does, it excludes it from a referral. So when a customer goes offsite to a payment gateway URL and then comes back in to finish the payment, this is not counted. So that's actually skewed our data. So you need to watch out for those kinds of things here. So at first it looked like our referrals were doing awesome and it's the best way of getting our conversions. But when you dig down deeper into it, perhaps it may not be that way. So this is the traffic source medium report. Many of the digital marketers will go to this report consistently because they're the ones who will be most likely responsible for making up the UTM tracking codes of the URLs in their campaigns. So again, source is where the user came from, for example, Facebook, Line, Twitter, Google Ad. Now mind you, there's a small thing I just want to make note of. If you're doing Google Ads and you've set them up, you don't need to set up the source medium campaign inside of them. If you set up your Google Ads properly and you leave up auto tracking as the default selection, it will automatically generate that for you. So you don't need to go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you're just going to mess that up. Google Ads takes care of the source and the medium and the campaign stuff for you if you do the ads correctly. So going on, the medium is the way the traffic took to come to your website. Did it come from social? Did it come from referral? Did it come from search engine? So for example, source was Facebook, medium was social. Now on the web there are many examples and guidelines, and I'm going to post an example of one that I've set up as well as a link on this video that you can use in setting up your UTM. Now there's no magical way that everyone does it the same way. You set it up the way that you want it to work for your website or your business. You can kind of borrow concepts from existing, like I've shared in the template that I provide in the link below, but ultimately you want to come up with what works for your business. Okay, so the campaigns report, this is very useful for the digital marketers in conjunction with the source and medium because they have a specific campaign. They're going to name the campaign after some commercial thing that they're trying to sell or trying to do, whatever the aim is, whether it's to sell a certain product range, whether it's to get subscribers or leads or whatever it might be. Campaign is a commercial thing that you want to track. You give it a specific name and you can find it in these reports. Now what I've done here is, instead of going to the default table and showing you the metrics of, the session, the page and bounce rate and all that, I've decided to use the bar chart here. And this gives you a visual representation of which one has the most users. So you can see here the user count and you can see the bar chart. So when preparing these reports, it kind of gives you a much easier way to look at the data that can tell you at a glance what's performing the best. I mean, it's already, ordered down from highest to lowest, but this will help you on your reports. And you can do it with a pie chart over here as well. So in this example, we can see the festive campaign is the highest performing one, followed by the Huawei one. But then we turn it down to this comparison over here, this option here, and you can see here compared to site average that the 50 Thai baht campaign here is actually performing the best on goal conversion rate. And no wonder, they're actually advertising this product for 50 baht. That's a good deal compared to some of the other more expensive items. That's why the goal conversion rate is a lot higher. Now these ones here, they're doing really bad. If you're getting anything that's kind of way under the average here, like for me, it looks like there's no conversions at all. That's what it's telling me here. So it's well below the goal conversion rate. Maybe these just started and they haven't actually got any data yet, but you need to monitor against the baseline. If anything's performing over the baseline, doing well. If anything's going under, you need to ask questions about why it's not performing. Finally, we have the behavior section. Moving on from the acquisition report section, we have the behavior report section. Now this is a common area you're going to go to as well to see metrics about the web pages in your website. So on the overview screen, you're going to see this kind of default view coming up here. It should look similar. You have by default the page views over the bounce rate. So the page views are not unique. They're the number of page visits or hits you're going to get within a certain time period. And the bounce rate is basically people who are coming to that page and immediately leaving without engaging with the website content. So we can see here how many page views, how many unique page views in a session, the average time on page, the bounce rate, and the exit rate. Now, the last three metrics that you see over here are probably more important than the ones over here. This is a general indication that's good, but average time on page, if that's low, you've got a problem. People, a low time here and a high bounce rate, big problems because people are leaving really quickly, and that's why, because they're not engaging. The longer period you have more average time on page, the lower bounce rate will usually come from that because it means they're engaging with the website. And the exit rate means that they're exiting from pages really quickly. So this bounce rate isn't too bad, but you could still work on it. And this is, mind you, the average of all pages on the website. If you want to look deeper into that information, you go into the actual all pages reports, which we're about to do in the next oncoming section. So this is the all pages report, and you can actually align it with the data, which is the metrics like your sessions, your users, your bounce rates, your average time on page, etc. You can do that. But in this example, we went to the comparison one, and we wanted to compare the bounce rate. You can select it from the drop down here, and you can do it from the page views. So you can see the bounce rate. We want to basically measure the engagement of users on each page. So you can see the device page and the post-paid packages page. The bounce rate's low. People are engaged. But the home page, a lot of people are coming in and just not going anywhere. But that kind of happens with home pages a lot if you generally don't have any very obvious call to actions or very attractive campaigns happening on it. So at this time, there might not have been a very good call to action or attractive campaign happening. Now, what's concerning more here is these ones here, where we've got a detail page on a particular product and one here for a news article. There is very low engagement. So for these ones here, a lot of users are coming in and they're leaving. Whatever's on that page is not really appealing to them. Getting out of that and going back to the tabular view, where you can see the icon here we've got selected, we can then compare the time periods, January 10 to the Feb. So this is a month-on-month view compared to the December one. All right. So we can look at the page views. That's the metric we're comparing. The blue is the new one. The orange one is the older one. The blue is pretty consistent, the new one, but the previous period it came from a very low point. But at this point here, we weren't tracking anything on the website. This was before the tracking was actually implemented. And as Google Analytics got to start counting the data, that's when it started going up and hitting around the usual hit here. So at first there was a bit of a spike in the page views, but then it started kind of averaging out. And you can see around this point, amongst the two time periods, they're almost very similar. There's not much difference between them. So given these two time periods, there was probably no significant campaign run during that time. If there is, you'd notice a usual spike if the campaign actually brought in more traffic or things like that. So here, when I've compared the time periods, you can see those segments reported under each page differently, and you'll return back the metrics over here that we've seen most commonly. And at the top, it's very useful. It'll tell you that you performed worse than the previous time period. So on page views and unique page views, they were slightly down, but these kind of numbers are quite low. They're probably nothing to get concerned about, but obviously the higher the difference, you might want to be concerned about it. But the average time on page went up. So this is, you go through here, you can see the comparison of the metrics, and that's really useful in determining the engagement of your website compared to different time periods. And so under the behavior report, you'll also see the landing pages. So in the landing pages, you will get the information about what page people came in to the website, usually from social media link or Google search or referral, whatever. That's the first page they came into your website on. So if you've got your landing pages that are specifically set up for capturing traffic and they're reported in here, that's great. But if you've got pages here that you never set up to be landing pages, well, you might want to put something more attractive on them because they're getting traffic. And if they're counted as a landing page, you want to at least have some call to action button on them so you can link traffic and push them through. So for instance, if we look at the bounce rate here, we can see a lot of traffic came through from the Facebook referral to this page, but it seems like there was no obvious call to action or kind of proposition to the customer because a lot of them bounced. Whereas compared to this device page here, a lot of them came in and they did something with it. They clicked on something, they might have bought something. So that's where you can use this bounce rate metric to really understand what's going on, and you can get insight and you might be able to make changes to benefit your business from that. This is the section about events, and you can find events under the behavior section of your Google Analytics reporting as well. But there's a whole bunch more to it than just the reports. There's also the tracking and the setup of events. This video won't really cover the scope of how you set up the events, how you trigger them. There's several different ways you can do it. The most common way of doing it is using the Google Tag Manager to create a tag that is set up with a trigger. The trigger could be a page URL view, it could be a click ID, or a number of things that set the tag off. The tag will then report an event with parameters into Google Analytics. Now in Universal Analytics, that is the event category, the event action, and also the event label. We're not going to get into too much detail about this, but that's how the mechanism works. And by using that in Universal Analytics, you can track what customers are doing on your website. Now, these could make up the micro conversions of your website, and they could also be used to make up the macro conversions. But generally, I would kind of say they're more of a micro conversion tracking tool, given my experience, because your macro conversion for, say, e-commerce will be taken care of with your e-commerce goal conversion. But not to say you might not be tracking that. You might be tracking submit a form on your website as a goal. That could be done through as an event as well. And it could also be set up using the data layer. Now, the data layer is a more advanced concept. It's usually related to the e-commerce tracking. It's using a JavaScript object inside the web pages that you can push data to. But we're not going to cover that. That's just more of an advanced feature. So getting back to what events are, like I said, they track interactions with the website, and you could track, say for instance, the example down below here, we're tracking the button that people click on to start the new postpaid number journey, and then we're also using the event tracker to track people who are entering in their number that they want to port to a new postpaid contract here. And then we also might want to set up events that track people clicking on the menu object over here, so we can track all the clicks happening here, so we can see what kind of buttons or links people are pressing on the most from here. So this will help us when we see what's happening, how to reorganize our menus to make people, to allow users to find what they're looking for even better and easier. So you can use those events to get instant insight about how customers are interacting with your website. So the kinds of types of events, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is an example of what we use them for. We can use them to track clicks. We can use them to track page loading, like I said before, form submissions, people pressing certain keystrokes from the keyboard, although that's probably more of a low use case, that one. file download from your website, if they're sharing through social media, for video playback as well. Now, just a tip on this one, if you're going to put videos in your website and you want to track them, I would highly recommend using YouTube videos because they track pretty much automatically through Google Analytics, and there's not much setup required to track those kinds of things. All right, you can track page scrolls. You can also track loading a specific script in your website. So if you've got something more complicated in your website, you want to track a certain event from a JavaScript function on your website. You can track logins to the website from registered users, and also you can track JavaScript errors. Now that's pretty useful in tracking JavaScript errors, so you know if there's something that could be preventing your users from interacting or engaging with your website. That could also ultimately affect your conversion rate too. So knowing where those JavaScript errors are coming from, you can pinpoint them and you can fix them or ask your development team to fix them. Key feature of Google Analytics at the bottom we've said is to set, record and analyze your own custom events and track your customers' behavior. You can use these events to set up custom and exploration funnels of the website. So if you string events together in a sequence for buying something or making a lead form or subscribing, you can track each step of the journey through an event and see the drop-off rate between each step. If there's a high drop-off rate, you know where to go looking to try and improve the user experience. Maybe a button's not working, maybe it's not loading properly, something like that. The more steps you have in the funnel, the more events you can track, the more fine-tune you can do on your user experience. After the events, we want to check out the goals. There's a conversion goal section and you'll have a goal overview. You can select the type of goal from up the top here. You can choose all goals to average or aggregate them all out, or you can choose a specific goal. And you can choose different metrics to measure here. We won't get into too much detail. You can explore that yourself. You can compare the information. This is on all reports, mind you. You can compare on an hour, day, weekly, monthly. Now, generally, the longer time period here will smooth it out. If you're looking at hourly, it's like a stock market chart. The more time range and the less points you have on it, the more smoothing you get on it. So if you're calculating hourly, you're going to see it going up and down a lot. It might be harder to read. Play around with this until you can get something that you can easily read for the trending. So in this report, we can see the number of goal completions. We can see the value. Now, you might have a subscription form that is like $5 worth of value. They subscribe to that form, that lead form, and that means $5 for you. You could register the goal conversion with a $5 value. That's what you would be seeing in there. So you'd see an accumulation of that value coming up. So 689 times $5, and you'd see that value in there. Now this is your goal conversion rate, and this is your goal abandonment rate. So if this is high, there's something wrong going on with your goal. Likewise, it's kind of inverse relationship with your conversion rate over here. This is pretty low, but as you might start up a website, you might expect to see something low here until you're doing all your campaign work, your website's properly indexed by Google, and so forth. You want to be checking this and looking at ways you can increase this over time. So you want to be setting up goals that align with your business objectives and not just to track user engagement. User engagement, you can track with events. I would use your goals sparingly, and I'd set them up to track macro goals, not micro. But if you've got a very important micro goal, you can put it in here. And the reason I say this is because you have a limit of 20 goals per view. So these are the standard goal conversion tracking in Google Analytics. This is not e-commerce goal tracking. So once you do set up a goal inside of Google Analytics, you will see a funnel visualization. You can see the number of people in this setup. We've got add to cart, we've got address, we've got payment, and then we've got the purchase at the end. So we've got a 0.79% funnel conversion rate. Now bear in mind, that is not overall goal conversion rate. What we're looking at this is the number of people who added to cart compared to the number of people who finished it. The goal conversion rate is basically how many sessions versus how many goals. So we're using totally different metrics to calculate this here. This just shows you how many people drop off per funnel of the goal. Again, this is probably not the best example because you should be using e-commerce tracking for this kind of information. This is generally, you should cover it from a step sign up point of view, but we're just illustrating how a goal conversion or funnel visualization would work in the standard goal conversion tools. when we're looking at the standard goal conversions inside of Google Analytics, we have destination type, we have a duration type, we have pages, screens per session, and we also have an event. So in the previous section, we talked about setting up an event, and if we have an event category, action, and a label, we can then make that event into a goal. We can convert that event into a goal, but we must be careful in doing that, and that must be a very important event that you can use as a goal that aligns with your business KPI. If it's something like a minor or a micro goal, micro conversion, I tend to leave it as an event that you could track, because again, you have a limit of 20 goals per view on your Google Analytics. You can get around that by making lots of views, but you're probably just going to make your work more difficult for you. So I've highlighted the destination one here because that's the most common one. If you're using the destination goal, you're able to get this funnel visualization, which is very helpful. If you're looking at the other types of goals, you're not going to get that kind of information. And really, duration and pages per screen view, I don't see them commonly being used, because you can get those metrics already from the reports that we covered in the previous section of this presentation. Generally wouldn't use them, but you can. It really depends on what your goals are. If your goal is to keep people on your website page for 5 minutes to watch a video, yes, you could set that up. And furthermore, if it is to watch a whole video on your website because your video has links or it's promoting some product to another affiliate website, your goal might be to watch a video for 75% at least. That event could be turned into a goal for you to track. So we mentioned e-commerce goals before. They are essential for e-commerce tracking. There was an older version of e-commerce tracking on the website. I think it was called the standard one. You can use that, but I would recommend, if you're starting out, definitely going to enhanced e-commerce tracking, because you can actually push more data into your e-commerce tracking in the new version of it than the old traditional or standard method. And if you're using the older method, I'd say move over. We're not going to cover the whole setup of this in this video. We've got another video which I've linked down below, which will show you how to do that. So this relies a lot on the data layer to push user activity to Google Analytics, and also to enable the enhanced e-commerce tracking in GA. So there's two things you've got to do. You've got to have a data layer in your website, which is a JavaScript object or a JSON file, and it's got to be dynamic. You've got to push the dynamic values in your checkout into that data layer and do it with the right syntax, the right way, and then Google's going to be able to get that data, pull it in, and you're going to get enhanced e-commerce tracking on your Google Analytics. Now, the last thing is as well that you may need to do some work in the Google Tag Manager to do that. Again, we're not covering how to set that up in this presentation. We're just going to cover what it is. So within the Google Analytics Enhanced E-commerce, it provides insight into the commercial transactions. So what's being sold online, how much revenue is being generated, how many transactions you're making, certain metrics like average order value, your customer lifetime value, cart abandonment rate, and revenue by traffic source, and furthermore. So when we looked at all those reports before and we compared the acquisition behavior and everything, audience and everything, to the conversion rate, that was a standard conversion rate. You can do all of that with e-commerce conversions. So that same methodology can be applied. We've got those new metrics in reports to compare the conversions and revenue against the existing dimensions. I'm just going to quickly show you an example of enhanced e-commerce inside of Google Analytics, just with the Google Merchandising Store example. You can add this in here. If you just do a quick Google search for the Google Merchandising Store, they'll allow you to add the property and the views to your Google account. So you can actually use it to test out and filter traffic. So it's a very useful thing to kind of look at if you're testing without actually getting much data in your own website, which you're still setting up. I'm just going to go to it here. I'm just going to make the page a little bit full screen, and this is the home, right? So just going to open this up a bit wider so we can see the full thing, and we go into conversions. And once you've turned on enhanced e-commerce, that thing you really need to do. So if you're going into, if you haven't already got it turned on, it will just come up with a message saying you haven't turned it on. You go into it by actually going into the property, going into the view, and then going to e-commerce settings. So this is the like traditional or standard e-commerce that came around before, and this is the enhanced one. So you just turn both of them on. We're not going to cover the funnel steps, this is a bit more advanced, but when you turn them on and you've got it set up with your JSON data layer as well, you should be able to get access to the enhanced e-commerce tracking. Won't happen immediately. You do need to tend to wait maybe up to 4 hours or so for it to be enabled, and even longer for your data to come through. So we're just going to quickly go through some of the main sections here, not all of them, but first of all, overview. You will be visiting quite a lot. You can see here just at a snapshot the revenue and also the e-commerce conversion rate. They're already preset as the two dimensions that you're tracking here, or two metrics, sorry, you're tracking here, because they kind of have a very tight correlation to each other. The higher the conversion rate, obviously the higher the revenue you're going to get. So you can see the revenue here, the conversion rate, number of transactions over a time period that you can set here, and you can change this time period as you wish. You can even change the the metrics that you're comparing here as well if you want to compare something else. So here you'll also get a further breakdown of your marketing campaigns, internal promotion. This is banners that you put on your website. You'll need to go and track this with data layer code, but you can track the impressions and the clicks. So if you're promoting products in your website, you can actually use that. I would strongly not recommend using UTM tags for internal tracking of your banners. That's only for external websites. That's where you use internal promotions for, because that'll track your internal clicks coming through and driving to your store or your product details page. And so we've also got the order coupon code. Now there's two types of coupon. There's a product coupon and there's an order coupon. And obviously a product is applied to the product. The order coupon is applied to the total purchase. So it could be 3 items in your cart. Getting 10% off would be an order coupon code. And so we also have a section for affiliation as well. Won't go into too much detail. So at a glance here, you can see the top performing items, the revenue they're producing, and the percentage here of the revenue as well. So you're going through shopping behavior, and you can see a funnel coming through here that you have all sessions, product views, then add to cart and checkout. So you can see how your funnel performs and where you got a major drop off. So this one here probably needs to be looked at, because I don't think the add to cart option is even working right now, but people do seem to be getting through to the transaction. So if you want to go even further into the checkout, you can see that even further. Looks like they've taken away this step and you've only got payment review, and that's it, the final transaction. Now underneath, you'll see new versus returning visitors here, and that's a good indication. Commonly in a lot of e-commerce shops, you'll see the returning visitors spending more. That tends to happen. Another useful report is the product performance one. So you can see here the product name and also the sales performance, and all the e-commerce related metrics that we're talking about pretty much have all e-commerce metrics here. But in other reports, like if I went up to your acquisition report and I looked at the say source medium, I could get the e-commerce conversions. So we've got standard conversions here, but I've now got access to e-commerce conversions. So here we've got the e-commerce conversion rate, transactions, and revenue. So it brings all those metrics into it. Now if I went to another one, which is engaged users, that'd change the metrics here. So I get different metrics coming in that are more orientated or more specific for this particular goal set. Going back to conversions again and e-commerce. So we're going into the sales performance here. Sometimes it does take a while to load. You can see the transaction ID. Now this is very, very important. If you're performing an e-commerce website, you need a unique transaction ID for every single transaction that takes place on your store. I had a scenario working with a business who couldn't get the transaction ID unique. It was repeating sometimes. So therefore what was happening is that the revenue wasn't correct, because you had the same item being purchased multiple times when it wasn't. That's a transaction ID. Now the rest of it here is your revenue. You can also break down your tax and your shipping costs inside of your data layer. Some of you might like to include that into it anyway. It's up to the business how they want to report that information. Now going into marketing, we can see the internal promotion order coupon. We talked about those earlier. So if I go into internal promotion, you can see here we have banners on the website. This is not really performing that well, but what you would do, you would have impressions, which is people who are viewing the banner, then you'd have clicks, which is people clicking on the banner, and therefore you get your click-through ratio coming from that, and you can also track goal conversions coming from that. And furthermore, we have the product and order coupon. Order coupon is coupons that apply to the whole cart. You can see them over here and how much the discount is and the revenue that they're producing. And then you also got a product coupon which is set to a particular product. In this example, we don't have any products using a product coupon, but you would probably use them in your own store.